"I want to speak to the owner immediately," my mother-in-law Margaret demanded through the phone, her voice carrying the imperious tone she reserved for service workers and people she considered beneath her station. "Your employee, a woman named Vivian Patterson, is neglecting her family duties for this pathetic little job. Her children are suffering, her husband is being ignored, and she needs to be fired so she can focus on what actually matters." My receptionist, well-trained in handling difficult callers, transferred the call to my office with a knowing smile that I could somehow sense even through the phone system. But why did Margaret's demanding voice suddenly go silent when I answered, and why did 15 seconds of dead air follow my simple greeting? "This is the owner speaking. How can I help you, Margaret?" The silence stretched longer. I could almost hear her mental recalculation, the gears grinding as she processed what she'd just done. "Vivian?" Her voice had lost its imperial edge entirely. "But you, I thought, you work for a design company." "I own a design company. Meridian Interiors. The company you just called to demand I fire myself." I leaned back in my leather chair, savoring the moment I'd never known I was waiting for. "Would you like to continue this conversation, or should we pretend it never happened?" She hung up without another word. The click of disconnection was the most satisfying sound I'd heard in 10 years of marriage to her son. Margaret Patterson had been undermining me since the day I married her son. David and I had met at a business conference 10 years ago. I'd been presenting on sustainable design practices to a room full of industry professionals. He'd been attending on behalf of his family's construction company. We'd connected over shared values and different perspectives, debated the future of green building over conference coffee, and 6 months later, we were engaged. Margaret had been horrified from the moment David introduced me. "She's not from our circles," she'd told David in her sitting room, assuming I couldn't hear from the hallway where I'd paused to admire family photographs. "She's a working girl. Her family doesn't summer anywhere. What kind of wife works when she doesn't have to? What kind of woman prioritizes career over family before she even has a family to prioritize? The kind of wife who'd built a successful company before meeting her husband. The kind who valued independence over inherited status. The kind who had no intention of becoming a Patterson family accessory, displayed at charity galas and garden parties but otherwise expected to remain decoratively silent. But David loved me fiercely, and his father Richard respected my work ethic and entrepreneurial spirit, so Margaret had been forced to accept our marriage. Her acceptance, however, had never included actually respecting me as a person. The little job of comments had started immediately after our wedding. "Still playing office, dear?" Margaret would ask at family dinners, her tone dripping with condescension dressed as concern. "Don't you think you should focus on giving David children instead of running that little shop of yours? It's so modern, wives working." I couldn't bear to be away from my family like that. But I suppose some women are built differently. "When are you going to settle down and be a proper Patterson? We have a reputation to maintain, you know." She'd never asked what I actually did. She decided I was unworthy on our first meeting, and no evidence would change her assessment. In Margaret's world, evidence was irrelevant when prejudice had already reached its conclusions. Meridian Interiors had been my obsession, my passion, and my identity for 15 years. I'd started in my studio apartment at 24, designing spaces for friends and family who couldn't afford professional designers but wanted something more thoughtful than furniture store displays. Word spread through social networks before social media existed, friend to friend, satisfied client to curious acquaintance. Within 18 months, I was turning down projects. Within 3 years, I'd needed employees. Within 7, I'd needed a real office. Within 12, I'd needed a second location and specialized departments. The company now handled commercial and residential projects across 3 states. Our client list included boutique hotel chains, tech company headquarters, medical facilities, and private clients whose names appeared in magazines and occasionally on buildings. We'd won 17 design awards, including 2 from the American Society of Interior Designers. We'd been featured in Architectural Digest twice, Dwell 3 times, and countless regional publications. Revenue last year, $47 million. Profit margins that made our accountants smile. A reputation that brought clients to us rather than requiring us to chase them. But to Margaret, I was still playing office. Still neglecting my wifely duties. Still a working girl who didn't belong in the Patterson family and never would, regardless of what I achieved. The phone call incident had been precipitated by Margaret's latest campaign against my independence. She'd arrived for a surprise visit while David was away on business in Chicago, expecting to find me lounging at home in yoga pants or perhaps shopping with other Patterson wives. Instead, she found me rushing out the door for a critical client meeting with a hotel developer who represented $3 million in potential contracts. The children were with our long-established nanny, Maria, who'd been with us for 6 years. There was no one available to entertain Margaret properly. "You're leaving?" But I drove all this way. 2 hours in traffic. I have a work commitment, Margaret. I told David's assistant to let you know I'd be extremely busy this week. I have 4 major presentations and a contractor crisis at the Morrison project. Work commitment. She'd said the words like they were obscenities, her lip curling slightly. What about your commitment to this family? To your children? To being a proper wife? David deserves someone who prioritizes him. My children are well cared for by someone they love. My husband supports my career enthusiastically. My work provides significantly to our family's income and lifestyle. I'd gathered my bag and keys, refusing to be delayed by her manufactured outrage. I'm sorry you're disappointed. Please make yourself comfortable, Maria can prepare lunch for you. I'll be back by 7. She hadn't made herself comfortable. She'd made phone calls. The first call had been to David, complaining about my abandonment of my domestic duties. David, bless him, had shut her down immediately. We'd worked through our approach to his mother years ago, after one particularly awful Thanksgiving, united front, clear boundaries, no triangulation, no exceptions. Mom, Vivian's work is important to her and to our family. I support her completely, and you need to respect that. If you can't respect our arrangement, you shouldn't visit when she's busy. And frankly, showing up unannounced when you know she has a demanding week isn't respectful either. Undeterred by her son's lack of support, Margaret had tried a different approach. The second call was to Meridian Interiors directly. She apparently looked up the company online, something she never bothered to do in 10 years, and found the main office number. She called with the specific intention of getting me fired from a job she still assumed I merely held rather than created. My receptionist, Priya, had recognized Margaret's name immediately from years of office conversation. Mrs. Patterson, your mother-in-law is on line 1, she'd said, transferring the call with barely suppressed amusement. She seems quite upset about something. She demanded to speak with whoever's in charge. She's always upset about something. I'll handle it. I'd answered expecting complaints, demands, the usual Margaret theatrics about family obligations and proper wifely behavior. What I hadn't expected was her ordering my own company to fire me. Your employee is neglecting her family for this pathetic little job. The confidence in her voice had been absolute. Fire her immediately so she can focus on what actually matters. Her husband is David Patterson of Patterson Construction. I'm sure you understand the importance of keeping that family happy. She'd actually tried to leverage the Patterson name to get me fired. From my own company. The company I'd built from nothing while she was attending garden parties. The 15 seconds of silence after I identified myself as the owner had been the most satisfying moment of our 10-year relationship. The fallout was immediate, comprehensive, and lasting. Margaret stopped coming to family events entirely. She claimed health issues that prevented travel, various vague ailments that came and went conveniently whenever family gatherings approached. Her Instagram, however, showed plenty of lunches at the club, charity galas, and vacation photographs. The health issues were remarkably selective. She communicated with David through his father, who served as reluctant intermediary for messages that could have been delivered directly but required the buffer of Margaret's pride. She's humiliated, my father-in-law Richard told us during one dinner at our house, shaking his head with the exhausted expression of a man who spent 40 years managing his wife's social anxieties. She had no idea the company was yours. She built up this entire narrative about your little job and never bothered to check whether reality matched her assumptions. She could have asked, I said, not bothering to hide my frustration. At any point in 10 years, she could have shown basic curiosity about what I actually do. She could have visited the office, looked at our website, asked David simple questions. She chose not to because she'd already decided I was beneath her notice. Margaret doesn't do curiosity. She does assumptions and pronouncements. Richard shook his head slowly. She's my wife and I love her, but she's also been dead wrong about you since the beginning. This might be the first time she's been forced to acknowledge it in a way she can't rationalize away. The acknowledgement, when it finally came, was characteristically Margaret. A handwritten note on her personal stationery, delivered 6 weeks after the phone call, written in her careful cursive, Vivian, it seems I was mistaken about the nature of your employment situation. While I still believe family should take priority over business concerns, I recognize that you have apparently achieved some level of success in your professional endeavors. I hope we can put this awkwardness behind us and move forward as family. Regards, Margaret. No apology for a decade of dismissal and condescension. No acknowledgement of how she'd treated me at family gatherings. No recognition of the insult embedded in her phone call. Just some level of success and a desire to pretend nothing meaningful had happened. David was furious when I showed him the note. She still doesn't get it. She still thinks you should prioritize family over your career, like those are opposites. Like having a successful company means you don't care about us. Like the two things can't possibly coexist. She's 72 years old and she's never worked a day in her life. Her mother didn't work. Her grandmother didn't work. She doesn't have the framework to understand what I've built or why it matters. I set the note aside, filing it with other documents I'd probably never look at again. What matters is you understanding. You and the kids. Margaret's opinion lost relevance a long time ago. The children, 8 and 6, had their own perspective on the situation. Grandma says you work too much, our daughter Sophia observed one evening while I helped her with homework. She says mommy should stay home and daddy should work. She says that's how God intended families to be. Some mommies stay home, and that's wonderful, it's hard, important work. Some mommies work outside the home, and that's also wonderful. Some daddies stay home too. The important thing is that families figure out what works for them, not what someone else thinks should work. I like that you work. This from our son Marcus, surprising me with his directness. When you showed us your office, everyone listened to you. You told people what to do and they did it. You're the boss of everybody there. That's right. I built that company from nothing. Grandma says being the boss isn't for ladies. She says ladies should be gracious and let men handle business. Grandma grew up in a different time, with different expectations. She learned rules that made sense to her then. But times change, and rules change, and what matters now is doing work you love and taking care of people you love. You can absolutely do both. I do both every day. Can I be a boss when I grow up? You can be anything you want, a boss, an artist, a scientist, whatever calls to you. And if anyone ever tells you that something isn't for you, because of who you are rather than what you can do, you send them to me. I'll set them straight. Marcus grinned. Like you set Grandma straight? Something like that. The company continued to grow despite, or perhaps because of, my complicated family dynamics. I'd learned long ago to compartmentalize, to build walls between personal frustration and professional focus. The judgment from Margaret, the skepticism from certain clients who expected male leadership in creative industries, the subtle assumptions that a wife and mother couldn't also be a serious businesswoman, all of it had become fuel rather than obstacle. Every time someone underestimated me, I worked harder. Every time someone dismissed my little job, I expanded my ambitions. Every time someone suggested I should focus on family instead of business, I proved that both were possible and that the question itself was insulting. Meridian Interiors reached $47 million in revenue the year Margaret made her phone call. 2 years later, we crossed $60 million. 3 years after that, I received an acquisition offer from a major design conglomerate, $120 million for a company I'd started in my apartment 15 years earlier. I declined without much deliberation. The company was mine, my vision, my team, my creation. I wasn't interested in becoming someone else's employee, answering to corporate boards who would second-guess my instincts. Margaret, I heard through Richard, was stunned that I'd turned down such money. Why would anyone refuse $120 million, she'd apparently asked. She could retire and finally focus on her family. She still didn't understand. She probably never would. Margaret's attitude shifted gradually over the following years, not from genuine enlightenment but from relentless reality. The evidence of my success became impossible to ignore, even for someone as committed to her assumptions as Margaret. Media coverage of Meridian Interiors appeared in publications she actually read. Industry awards were mentioned at charity events she attended. Recognition penetrated even her carefully curated social bubble, delivered by friends who asked about her accomplished daughter-in-law. I saw you in that magazine, she mentioned during one rare family gathering, her tone carefully neutral. The business one with the blue cover. You looked very professional in the photographs. Thank you, Margaret. I suppose you've done quite well for yourself. The article mentioned some impressive numbers. I have. Thank you for noticing. It's just. She paused, searching for words that wouldn't come across as the continued criticism they obviously were. It's not what I expected when David married you. I thought you'd settle down eventually. Become more traditional. I thought the business was a phase. I'm traditional in my own way. I'm committed to my husband, devoted to my children. And I take care of my family fiercely. I just also happen to run a company. The two aren't mutually exclusive, no matter what you were taught to believe. Your version of taking care is different from mine. Yes, it is. But it works for us, and that's what matters. The real transformation in our relationship came when Margaret needed help she couldn't find elsewhere. Richard's health declined suddenly and severely, a stroke that left him unable to manage the Patterson family's construction company. The business that had been in the family for 3 generations, that employed 40 people, that represented the Patterson legacy in tangible form, it suddenly needed leadership that the family couldn't provide. David, who worked in technology consulting, had no construction experience and no interest in leaving his career. His sister Victoria, who'd moved to London years ago, had no intention of returning and no management skills regardless. Margaret, who'd never worked, had no skills to contribute beyond hosting client dinners that no longer mattered. They came to me in desperation. "You know business," Richard managed to say from his hospital bed, his speech slowly returning but still labored. "You understand how companies work. Help us. Please. Don't let my father's legacy collapse." I spent 6 months stabilizing Patterson Construction, commuting between two businesses, sleeping 5 hours a night. I didn't run it directly, I didn't have construction expertise, and the company needed someone who understood that industry. Instead, I brought in professional management, restructured operations that had become inefficient under Richard's declining oversight, and positioned the company for sale to a larger firm that would maintain the family legacy while providing competent leadership. The sale closed at $15 million, less than the company had been worth in its prime, but far more than it would have been worth if it had collapsed under Margaret's inability to manage anything practical. "You saved it," Richard told me afterward, his speech almost fully recovered, tears in his eyes. "You saved what my father built. What I spent my life building. I saved what the family needed. That's what family does. Margaret knows what you did. She knows we'd have lost everything without you. Margaret knows a lot of things now that she could have known years ago if she bothered to look." Margaret's note after the sale was different from her previous communication. It arrived by mail, handwritten on her personal stationery, but something in the handwriting itself seemed changed, less careful, more genuine. "Vivian, I was wrong about you. Not just about your work, about everything. I spent 10 years treating you as less than you deserved, assuming you were less than you proved to be. I was cruel in ways I didn't recognize as cruelty because I was so certain of my own rightness. You saved Richard's legacy when I couldn't. You've built something remarkable of your own that I dismissed without understanding. And you've done it all while being a better wife to my son and mother to my grandchildren than I ever gave you credit for. I'm sorry. Truly sorry. Not for the embarrassment of the phone call, though that was humiliating, but for all the years before it. For every dismissive comment, every assumption, every time I treated your accomplishments as irrelevant. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I finally see what I should have seen from the beginning. Margaret." The apology was real this time. I could feel the difference in every word. The relationship never became warm, we'd lost too many years to Margaret's assumptions. The foundation of trust that normal family relationships require had been eroded by a decade of dismissal and condescension. We couldn't pretend that history didn't exist, couldn't build genuine affection on a foundation of remembered pain. But we found peace. A mutual recognition that we'd both misunderstood each other, she more than me, certainly, but I'd also made assumptions about her inability to change, her permanent incapacity for growth. "I wish I'd asked about your work sooner," she admitted during one of our later conversations, sitting in my living room with tea she'd accepted graciously. "I was so certain I knew everything about how families should operate. I never considered that my certainty might be wrong, that there were other valid ways to live. Most people don't question comfortable certainties. It's easier to judge than to understand. And being wrong is humiliating." She smiled slightly, the expression surprisingly genuine. "Especially when you demand that someone fire themselves from their own $47 million company. $60 million now, actually. Of course it is." She shook her head, something like admiration finally visible in her expression. "My son married well. I just took a decade to recognize it. The company is approaching $80 million now. David jokes that I could retire, that we could travel the world, that I've proven everything I needed to prove and more. But the work still calls to me, the creative challenges, the team I've built, the satisfaction of seeing spaces transform under our guidance, the knowledge that something I created from nothing continues to grow and evolve. Your mother called me about something today," I mentioned to David occasionally, when Margaret reaches out with genuine questions rather than criticisms. "Good things or bad things? Just things? Normal things? Mother-in-law and daughter-in-law things?" She asked about Sophia's recital. "That's progress. That's progress." The phone call that started as an attempt to destroy my career became a turning point in ways I never expected. Margaret's demand that I fire myself exposed the absurdity of her decade-long assumptions. The silence that followed, those 15 seconds of pure cognitive recalculation, marked the moment when reality finally penetrated her carefully maintained delusions about who I was and what I was worth. She'd spent 10 years dismissing my little job without ever asking what it actually was. She'd assumed I was playing at business while neglecting my family. She'd tried to weaponize my supposed employer against me, never imagining that I was the employer, that I'd built something more valuable than anything the Patterson family had created in 3 generations. The joke was on her. But it was also on me, for letting her judgment matter for so long, for spending years hurt by opinions that deserved no weight. I've learned that respect can't be demanded. It can only be demonstrated, and even then, some people refuse to see. Margaret didn't respect me when I was building my company from nothing. She didn't respect me when I was managing complex projects while raising children. She didn't respect me when I was holding my marriage together through challenges she never knew about. She only began to respect me when external validation became impossible to ignore: media coverage, acquisition offers, saving her family's legacy. That's her limitation, not mine. What matters is the life I've built, the company I've created, the family I've raised, the balance I've achieved, imperfect as it sometimes is. I want to speak to the owner, she demanded that day, certain she was about to destroy someone beneath her. She got what she asked for. She just didn't expect what she found. She called my company to demand I be fired. Your employee is neglecting her family for this pathetic little job. The receptionist transferred her to my office, the owner's office. My office? I answered, this is the owner speaking. How can I help you, Margaret? 10 years of dismissing my little job. 10 years of treating me like a wayward child playing office. 10 years of assuming I was nothing because she'd never bothered to ask. The company she tried to weaponize against me was mine, $47 million of mine. The 15 seconds of silence when she realized what she'd done was worth every moment of her condescension. She asked to speak to the owner. She got exactly what she asked for. Just not what she expected. The working girl she'd dismissed had built an empire while she was attending garden parties. And now she knows.